Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is sponsored by
Charlotte Stephanie Malrich, who is actually a past guest on our show as well as a contributing author to Among Animals,
which was released by Ashland Creek Press,
who we also had on the show.
So check them all out. How's that? She was kind enough to say, hey, you guys are awesome. Shout out whatever you want. So we have an awesome idea.
If you want to help us out, you can join our Which Side Podcast Street Team. Go to whichsidepodcast.com/street team and print out flyers, distribute them, and be awesome.
Yeah, so you print out the flyers. You can put them up anywhere. Vegan restaurants, tattoo shops, your grandma's house, wherever you think people would want to listen. And then take the picture, upload it. We'll, distribute out what you guys are doing out there, who's doing what. We'll also send out stickers to people who are active and other cool, fun things if we get the funding for it. And be awesome. Be on our street team. Be part of the Which Side fucking crew. Not the fucking crew, the Which Side crew.
If you'd like to sponsor an episode,
which we don't have one for next week,
all we ask for is at least $10. That's how much it costs us to produce each episode for you, so that's what we ask.
whichsidepodcast.com.
Click on the donate tab.
This is episode 118.
Yeah, we had Jack on from Soy Not Oi.
1 and 2. This is one of those, zines out there that I remember I made the fucking sloppy joes out of the first one. And now they came out with the second one. If you ever have heard of the first one or not, you need to check out the second one and fly over to AK Press and get the first one again. If you like punk, if you like being vegan, this is a must-own for everyone.
Their recipes built entirely to destroy the government.
Entirely. So make sure to check that out. And we have a really awesome conversation, so stick around for that. What news and events do we have going on this week?
Well, on the 16th of February, we are having the Salt Lake Anarchist Black Cross Prisoner letter writing event. Was going to be at the library, but seeing that it is President's Day, we failed to know that because we're anarchists and we don't give a shit. And so we're going to have to move it over to the Boing Anarchists Collective. So meet us at 7 p.m. if you're in Salt Lake.
Are typewriters welcome?
They are, definitely.
Sweet.
Also, it's that time of season where a lot of protests are happening. Anti-fur protests, also circus demonstrations. So if anything's happening in your area, totally let us know and we'll give it a shout out.
Just send us an email to info@whichsidepodcast.com. We'll throw it out there. You're putting on an event? We'll throw it out there. It's pretty simple. Because you guys are out in the trenches, we fucking love you. For the slingshot this week, on February 7th, 1848. Do you know what happened right then?
Do I ever know?
Yeah, I don't never know this stuff either. That's why I love this slingshot personalizer. But that was the day that the very first anarchist journal appeared. Do you know who wrote the first anarchist journal? Pardon, come on. Le represente des people. That's my horrible attempt at French.
It wasn't in English, so I didn't get it.
But that's pretty awesome.
If you'd like facts like these, you can get them out of the Slingshot Personal Organizer. You can pick one up at your local info shop. If you don't have a local info shop, you should start one. Or if you're lazy, you can go to akpress.com.
Mine's purple.
Mine's blue.
Hey, hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
So, how the hell's your day going?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Just, doing some typical weekend stuff in the morning. Looking forward to talking to you guys. How's your day going so far?
Pretty rough. I've been
Yeah?
building beds all day.
Wow.
Yeah. The shit we do for family, right?
Wow. That's cool, though.
And I just did my weekly animal sanctuary volunteering, which makes me sound totally...
He's just racking up the vegan points
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah, it is kind of, you're definitely on top at the moment. Good work.
It's kind of douchey. Like,
If it's true, it's true. It's not your...
It's true. It's not my fault that I'm better than everyone.
That is...
it's not your fault that you have
we
a
all learn
wife.
to live with that. That's right.
It's funny. It's not his choice. He begrudgingly goes. It's his partner saying, "God damn it, we're going to do this."
And there's a reason why I choose Saturdays to record, is so I can gloat about it.
You get to use it for all the wild Saturday night party talk, I assume.
Definitely.
Is that correct? Okay, good.
Oh man. So what led you to radicalism?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Boy, that's a good question. I think it was really, I guess, multiple things, really, just a lot of different things happening at the same time. A lot of it was, I think, being around the right people with the right ideas, if that makes sense. So I guess in high school and college and, being exposed to different people, and then people who really were interested in pushing you, I guess, meaning, you're interested in this. Why haven't you looked at this? That kind of thing. So, when I first started getting active around political stuff, it was with Joel. And we knew each other through, actually we met at a punk show my band was playing. That was when we first met. And I was attracted to punk bands that had, more, I guess, strong sort of political kinds of messages, although I liked a lot of different stuff, but that's sort of what appealed to me. And then I think meeting more people and then starting to get involved with, different kinds of activities. More and more people would say, well, you're going to this Central America thing, but have you looked at, why aren't you vegetarian, or why, do you know much about feminism? So I think it was kind of maybe a slippery slope to looking at different things in different ways, but probably being exposed to a really great, and smart community.
I always feel jealous of people that really had a good community like that.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the punk community, kind of like where I came up in, it was more the straight edge hardcore scene. Not a very good scene here. Not supportive, not, pushing, not super political, kind of just assholey bro type people.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had that too, but I think there was enough of us, and then as we started organizing stuff more and doing more, you just kind of attracted more and more people. I mean, there was always kind of the core group, and then there was a broader group, which were always very good people, but that core group was maybe the ones that did most of the shit work, basically organizing and making fun, making sure that things happened or whatever. But I do feel pretty fortunate about that, that group did exist. Yeah.
What were some of those bands that you said were so influential to you?
Well, one of the things actually I wrote about in Soy Not Oi 2 was, so we were all kind of tasked, if I can take a little bit of a back seat, I was going to say, that's not the right word. Tangent is probably more appropriate. In the book, we all were tasked with doing these different kinds of introductions, and we were trying to think about write about something that no one else can write about but you. So, in other words, it would be a waste for me to talk about something that someone else could cover. So, what I talked about in there was kind of how I met Joel and how that happened through punk. And so one of the things I talked about, I vividly remember the first time I heard Discharge when I was a teenager. There was this great punk rock record store called Roads to Moscow. It no longer exists in Tempe, Arizona. And we used to go there and hang out. And the one of the guys that worked there, Brad, would always like often would happen in record stores. People try to get you excited about stuff like, oh, you guys like this, you should, you would really like this or whatever. And I really remember when the first Discharge I heard was the Discharge Y EP, which I know is not considered as classic as the Here LP, but needless to say, that was like, I was just so blown away by that. the music and the style. And then I was really into stuff like, Conflict and Crass. And I liked more of the UK stuff, definitely, than stuff in the US in the beginning anyways. But that was really my first exposure. I mean, really getting those records and, opening up those Conflict 7 inches and having like, the sleeves that open with all this stuff to read. It was just like, wow, it was just so different than anything else. And, and it was extremely provocative and interesting. And, that was definitely sort of the musical stuff that I started off with. Yeah.
I think a lot of people come out of that, like, Crass Records, DIY punk culture and become really radicalized from that.
Yeah, in fact, it's funny because Joel talked about how he later on he wrote about and talked about how he thought punk and also many of the kind of vegan circles were sort of gateways to other kinds of liberation movements as well, and punk definitely was for me. And a lot of people I know, if it hadn't been for that music and community, both wouldn't have been exposed to those ideas. But also, it's funny as now a older person looking back, there was just so much that was really powerful about that community, like a little family, and people and I think the book really brought that out a lot when people kind of reflected on stuff and said, kids not feeling like they had places at home and having this space, we called the hippie core house, was where we did like shows and the zine and everything. And I never really realized until much later how much that was meaningful for a lot of people who just knew they could go there and not have to worry about stuff, if you understand what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was that, there was going to be a lot of loud music and there was going to be probably kids drinking beer. But beyond that, it was just a very safe space. There wasn't like a lot of hard drugs. There wasn't, it was in a pretty boring suburban area. It wasn't like exciting, whatever, but it was a place where people could just not worry about feeling, scared or nervous or, in some cases persecuted from situations at home. So I think that feeling of belongingness and community coupled with, being exposed to those different ideas. I mean, that was definitely where, that totally changed the way I thought about things for sure.
I always wonder if the generations coming up still have that same of culture in the punk scene. I'm so old now, I guess, and removed from it that I don't know if that really exists anymore. Do you?
I don't. I mean, I have been to some shows recently, and I'm not involved enough to really know. I'm not a good barometer. I mean, I still, I know people in bands, but I'm not really, really in the culture. Mm-hmm. I will say though, I saw a couple, I think it probably depends on where you are. I went to a couple shows in Oakland in the last few years and I was actually really impressed. First of all, I assumed I was going to go in there and there'd be 14 people. Most of them would be my age or older and just kind of standing in the back and clapping or whatever. But, it really wasn't like that. It was a range of people. There was a lot of young people. And a pretty good range. It was more young than sort of older, but it was packed. And there were people with it wasn't just a sort of slam dance and get out or whatever. I mean, there was definitely literature and people selling 7 inches, and it didn't seem like there was at least at the particular shows I went to, there wasn't a lot of political stuff, but it seemed like there was potentially a community there. But it's a really good question. I don't know.
It's funny you mentioned Oakland. I've actually been kind of surprised with Oakland the last couple of years. They really seem to have a lot of their shit together as a community.
I agree. I'd
like to think that they're still community. I mean, it's maybe been 10 years or so since I was heavily involved in the local punk community here, but I'd like to say that it was pretty together 10 years ago. And
I mean, I know the music is still political, and that's still the ideas are still being pushed.
Yeah,
yeah. I really hope it is. Maybe I should actually get off my ass and find out, right?
I can't. Well, when you guys find out, let me know, and then I can sound like awesome. But I wonder. So some of it I wonder is, when we were doing it in the '80s. There just weren't resources, right? So if you went to a punk show and somebody had a table and they were flyering anti-Nazi stuff or veganism stuff or political stuff or whatever, I mean, not that didn't exist, but it wasn't really accessible to teenagers. I mean, I guess you could get it at a library or something. And certainly, of course, there's been, stuff written about, all kinds of radical ideas for forever. So it's not that it just came about. But in terms of what is a typical, what's a 17-year-old, where are you going to get that, And I think, so it was really necessary to get it in places like that. Where now, I mean, with the internet, and you just have so much access to information and ideas, and so in some ways that's great because obviously people can get to it. But at the same time, I wonder, I don't know. What do you all think about that? I mean, do you think that would lessen that sort of tight knitness, or
I don't know. I wonder if the current internet trend kind of takes away from the family building that you get from being in those communities.
Yeah. I'm sure it's there, but just different. Like it reminds me, and I'm gonna, if it's okay, because I know you contacted me specifically about the book, so I'm gonna keep tying it back to that if that's cool.
Oh, yeah. We're whatever. We're totally relaxed.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So one thing that came up recently, which is kind of interesting, is that so the book doesn't have an index in it. So someone wrote me and said, "Hey, I think your book would be more successful if you had an index." And so we've been kind of talking about that, just amongst ourselves. But so I got into this sort of interesting conversation with this person who was not complaining, but just kind of saying, it's kind of a pain to flip through to find X, Y, and Z. And I said, some of that is on purpose. And I said, because it's trying to recreate a culture of needing to wade through and be, I don't know how to say this without sounding corny, but it's like interacting with this particular artifact, if you will, in a way that's different than the internet. I mean, in today's world, you can put in vegan mac and cheese in Google and get 10,000 hits. You don't need a cookbook. I mean, it's not necessary. But, we think there's something cool and special about this that's worth flipping through. And there's something in the experience, if you know what I mean, about having to flip through, which is different than finding something on the internet. So, maybe it's like that kind of difference. I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, it's interesting to think about because every time I found something in a cookbook I want to cook, it's by just flipping through, not specifically looking.
So you're going through looking at other things,
Yeah.
Exactly. Like what I tend to do with a cookbook is go through it and then bunny ear or put, a little bookmark in each thing that looks tasty at the time when I go through it.
Sure.
And you don't get that from the internet. You can't, you're searching for specific results like vegan mac and cheese. You're not like, oh man, this stew, I never even thought about eating stew. This is great.
And hypothetically, you can bookmark, obviously you can bookmark pages and go back, but it's just a different mentality. I mean, the value is in doing it quicker as opposed to what you get from having to do it slower, if that makes sense.
This is going to make me sound probably older than I am, but I wonder if like that whole mentality with like the newer generation is just that instant gratification that the new generation seems to have. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly true, and I'm not trying to sound like a Luddite. I mean, we're on Skype. I mean, so
yeah.
Technology is ruining everything, but we're on Skype, so obviously, clearly, we're okay with it at some level. And I'm totally fine with Googling stuff. It's extremely useful. It's just that I do think there are certain human activities that get missed through convenience. So I don't know if I don't know enough to know like at shows today, maybe that's just it's not necessary to get exposed to, animal rights or environmentalism or radical ideas at a punk show because you can just Google stuff or, so maybe it's just not as, I don't know. But you're right. I mean, there are definitely bands that still talk about interesting things like that. And so it exists, but maybe it's just not as necessary. I don't know.
Yeah. I always wonder because one of my defining moments growing up was going to an Earth Crisis show and getting No Compromise for the first time, the No Compromise scene. And like that fucking changed my world as a 15-year-old kid.
Well, zine tables and distros still exist like all over, like even at protests and everything else. Yeah. So I don't think it's dying in any sense.
And you certainly have like all the zine festivals and all that stuff too. So I mean, in some ways that's elevated. So that's really cool.
So how does that play out into your life now? Like, how does that growing up with those ethos and going through the punk scene? How does that, manifests itself today?
Well, I have had the fortune of, I still have a lot of really good contacts from people and friends. I mean, a lot of the closest friends I, know now are people that I met then. So, I mean, that's certainly been, a thread. And, it's definitely had an influence on the kind of work I want to do or the kinds of things that are important to me. One of the big projects I'm working at now at work, which I hold very dear, is trying to provide support for undocumented students who are accessing or trying to access college education. And, sort of having the background and coming from the perspective I have, I mean, this is like in line of like, this is what really matters to me, like that kind of thing. So, the thread is definitely still there. And certainly, I'm still, like I said, I still go to shows and I still listen to music, although I tend to not know good new stuff. So people will say, have you heard blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, is it like Battalion of Saints or something? It's like, I'm just kind of, but not really. But I would say the threads are definitely still there. And I think putting together the book, actually, that was, one of the challenges was how to have something that's still, how to do something that's not just exactly the same. B, how to do something that has that thread, but then will appeal to people outside of it. Because that was always the thing about punk. I mean, on the one hand, it was great that we got exposed to stuff, but it can be very insular. I mean, there may be, like I remember writing this article about why there aren't more women involved in more proactive roles in punk and what kinds of things about punk keep women out and stuff. And it was, I think for a younger person, like a great idea and a great thing to tackle, but it was so in punk, it's like, well, there, and if you would have said this to me then, it might not have made as much sense, but it's like, there's a whole world outside of why women are not in a punk band. I mean, that's important, but there's a lot of other, so it can sometimes have that kind of insular feeling, I think, too, or at least it could. Maybe it's more expansive now. I don't know.
So if you don't mind, I kind of want to go back to what you said you're working on now, which is, working with undocumented workers. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Oh, sure. No, that's actually with specifically with students. So in California, undocumented students can get a college education. However, there are a lot of barriers to that, including just human people who make it difficult for that to happen. So at the college that I've been working at, we've been trying to develop a system to streamline that and provide the support, because it's hard enough for young people to get through the bureaucracy of just, even if you don't have those kind of concerns. I mean, it's just, financial aid and I mean, all the different constraints are just ridiculously confusing. Mm-hmm. So if you're a person that also has, being undocumented and not knowing what your rights are, et cetera, to walk into a building and just go, yeah, I'm an undocumented citizen and blah, blah. It's very difficult to do. So and we're in the process of developing we actually just got approval to have some specific support, make sure that we have someone who's an ally and liaison for students, have a space that's sort of outside of that space where they provide some privacy and confidentiality, so that we can hopefully, increase the amount of students that take advantage of that. Because there's a lot of people who don't know that they can do that. And then people who do know who are, facing barriers, facing people who are discriminating against them or giving them, incorrect information and stuff. So.
Am I safe to assume that it's a state law, right? That the undocumented students can go, so it's not in every state, right? Correct. Do you know if it's the same way in other states?
I don't know what it is state to state. I mean, I'm pleased that we have that here, but no, I really don't know what it is state to state.
So, if you have an undocumented student, what do they have to do to go to college in California?
Well, they have to either, if they have a social security number, it makes it easier. But if they don't, it's basically just a question of they have to fill out information online. they get, basically it's like, sort of your typical administrative kind of process where you go through a procedure, get a number, and then register. What's difficult, of course, is you can go, but then, it's not free, not yet anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, you really have to also then, look into financial aid. I work at a community college, so it's reasonably inexpensive, but, go ahead. Sorry.
How does like FAFSA play into that with like undocumented students? Is that something that they're eligible for? Or?
Yeah, they are. And it's one of the things that happens now is, and this is not an undocumented issue. It's really just a student issue. They've changed financial aid so severely now because they basically don't want students to take, well, how do I say this? The intention is good. The concern was for a long time that students were taking a lot of classes, like say at community colleges, et cetera, that didn't transfer. So it winds up basically not counting for them. And then, it's like stealing money from people.
Mm-hmm.
So to try to fix it, they're really tightening what they're willing to support. And so, but they make it into this very like, you have to do, you're 17 years old, you need to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. So do A, B, and C, and then go from here to here. So the intention is so that they don't quote unquote take things they don't need. But for a lot of people, they don't really know what they want to do. So, the trick now is you can get financial aid, but if you're not getting a lot of assistance on, take this, don't take this, take this, don't take this, you can wind up then losing it later because you took too many, courses outside of your intended interest or whatever. Yeah.
I guess that goes into the larger play of just how, colleges are financed and.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh God, I couldn't imagine going now.
Yeah.
So it seems like the college you work for is, actively trying to work with the undocumented students. Do you find that there's a large fear in the community that, if they come forward as being undocumented now that they face deportation risks and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's mixed. I mean, there are, like anywhere else, we have some great leadership and, particularly through our multicultural studies department, and our new vice president have been real supportive, but it's like anywhere else. Not everybody, most people today are not blatantly obvious, if you understand what I mean, in terms of discrimination. There are maybe a handful that way, but people are more savvy about it,
mm-hmm.
I'm pretty lucky where I am as far as that goes.
How do you feel the new, what would it be called? The presidential, whatever you call it, shit that he came out with, that it was like the presidential order for, focusing on, not focusing on basically undocumented students and undocumented families and people that have been here for a long time. Have you seen like a positive result from that at all? I've just actually, I'm in this position relatively recently. So I haven't seen much of it here. What kind of conversations happen, where you guys are with that kind of, I know obviously you're not going to have the, proportions, but. Honestly, right now, it's one of those things that I've just been personally wanting to figure out how I can help more with the undocumented community. So that's why I'm a little curious about it. I don't know much about it and how to actually get in there and help. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously there's lots of different kinds of areas,
mm-hmm.
there's issues around, police brutality, there's housing, education, I think is a big one for me. Cause I've been in that area for a long time, but, it's interesting because like I'm in an area with a very large Latino population, and, I don't know. People are not, some people get it, but a lot of people are just not, it's really unfortunate, just not ready to kind of go there. You start talking about like, we do this event that's completely in Spanish, for the families of our students. And unfortunately, I only know a little bit of Spanish, and it's kind of funny because there are moments where some of the faculty and staff I know are making fun of me. I can tell by the way they're looking at me, and people are laughing. But I'm not 100% clear what they're saying, and I never quite get the interpretation later. But what's interesting about it is that event is actually kind of controversial because it's all in Spanish, and what will happen is sometimes you'll get a response like, well, why don't you just do it in English so then everybody can understand? And it's like, well, it's in Spanish because we're trying to reach a particular group of people, but also it conveys a certain kind of message about how we want people to feel comfortable in this space, and a lot of our, most of our students, a good chunk of them are first generation to college students. And, so their parents didn't go to college. Many of them, their first language is Spanish. And so having the event in Spanish is really cool, but you do get that kind of reaction like, well, why don't you just do it in English? Or why do you have to do it just for Latino families? Why don't you do it for all families? It's like, well, because we have a lot of really cool events that anybody could go to, so there's that. So that kind of thing, it's like, no one's going to come out and say, well, I don't really want to do stuff to support the Latino community or whatever. But they say these kind of roundabout kinds of things, which make you kind of like, so.
Where they need to check their privilege a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's right.
Does it ever lead to the conversation of, well, every event is centered on English? So
exactly, it does, but it's hard to have that because it's so far from what people have talked about. I mean, one of the things that came up, actually, this event is a good example. So the first one we did when I was there, one of the staff called me about 2 hours before the event, and she's panicking about something, left a message, and I called her back, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I'm worried about the brochure, not the brochure, but the, what do you call it? Like I always forget this stupid word. Like at an event, you get like a little pamphlet that describes it. It's like you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
All right. Anyways, I'm sorry. I can't remember. Anyway, so I'm like, what's the matter? And she's like, I don't know. I'm worried about the cover. And so I'm like, what about it? So the cover it was this painting that was, hard to describe it. Very colorful. It had kind of like an Aztec-y feel to it, almost like an Aztec god or goddess. It had this kind of look, and they had some sort of students in the background. And she was like, well, I don't know about the colors of this. And I'm like, well, the event's in like 2 hours. What? We're not. I mean, is it really that bad? And then she's like, okay, look, I'm just going to tell you. I'm like, okay, do it. What's happening? And she's like, I'm just worried because this cover is very Chicano. And I was like, well, yeah, but I mean, this is Tarde de Familia. I mean, isn't it appropriately Chicano? I don't know. Like, what's the problem with it being Chicano? And she's like, well, I've worked here for several years, and I'm just worried about how people are going to react to it. I'm like, but what is there to react? And we kept kind of going back and forth. But I mean, like, that's how deep seated the concern was. She was like, wow, I'm worried about, I said, you know what? Don't worry about it. And I'm in charge. I said, if things happen, they'll blame me. And I said exactly kind of what the road you're going on. I have the privilege to not get shit for this. So, I'll just, I don't understand what anybody is going to possibly be able to say. I mean, it didn't say like kill Whitey or something. I don't understand. There's nothing controversial on this. It's it's a beautiful painting. But it was, so there's definitely that, there's that concern. And I don't know where that all comes from and what all happened, but, and this is not from an undocumented person. I mean, this is, someone, a Latina woman in our community. But so there's, a lot of work to do.
So it's interesting that they feel the need of like self-censorship.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't imagine like how much work that must take to go against, the hundreds of years of colonization that created that.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. And, we were we had a meeting last week talking about it. And that's what the professor, Rodolfo Jacobo, is the one who started this event. And we started having this conversation. And then we've been trying to kind of elevate the work that we're doing. And it was really tense in the room for a second. And then somebody's like, what's going on? Why is it so tense here? And he said colonization. He said, that's, we're colonized. We can't even we can't even have this conversation amongst her, and it was, mostly a group of probably 90% Latino people. And maybe if, and I am not Latino, maybe there would be a space, maybe it'd be better for us non-Latinos to step out. I don't think that was the issue in the moment, but it was about colonization. You're absolutely right. So.
It's one of those hard things that I don't know how to combat within myself. I find myself not even recognizing it sometimes in myself, and not getting called out on it is, I think, the hardest thing, because I think it's so ingrained that we don't get called out so much on like the settlement mentality that we have, the colonization that we've done, where, we get called out if you're, you say things that might be, misogynistic to a term. You're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that way. But the colonization aspect of it, I don't think we call each other out on enough.
No, I agree. Or, and certainly don't notice enough.
I think that's the problem. I don't even notice it enough to call it out. It's one of those interesting things I've been really contemplating, a lot about lately. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what to do about it. It's one of those, yeah.
You have to have that, it's kind of goes back to what we talked about before. I mean, you have to have that community, or, it could even just be a couple people, that are interested in pushing you that way. And you have to, to be able to have that conversation, not with people who are bullying you, but people, hey, what was going on with that or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was funny, sort of related, but Dr. Jacobo and I will hang out once in a while. And when we first started hanging out, he bought me lunch or something this one time. And then the next time I was like, oh, let me get lunch. And then he's like, I got it. I'm like, no, you got it last time. And he's like, look, white boy, just calm down. Don't worry about it. But then we had this whole conversation. It was just funny. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, why are you so worried about it being equal? And I was like, well, I don't know. I was just trying to be fair. And he's like, well, don't worry about it. We're friends. You don't have to keep tabs on it. But it was the kind of thing like, I do that. And I, is that bad? Like, I'm trying to make sure like I'm contributing, but I think it was like it could be interpreted like as I don't trust you to keep it square. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like that was the intention, certainly, but I could see, and he didn't say that was true either, but I think that kind of thing could be interpreted that way. And it is kind of this, I don't know if that's, totally related, but it's just something you're not aware of in the way that you interact with people,
Have you read David Graeber's Debt?
Huh.
It's one of the things that it's just interesting that you brought up, because it's one of the things he brings up in there is that how economies used to be run based on this perpetuity of debt, where you would help each other out with purposely either overpaying the debt or underpaying the debt, so it maintains the relationship.
Interesting, yeah.
So never wanting to be equal, because if you ever try to make, in those societies, if you make your debt equal, then it's saying, I don't want a relationship anymore.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm going to take that back. Thank you. That's really cool. Yeah. Because in some ways, the eveningness separates you, because now we have no, I don't know. Well, certainly no financial connect. Not that that's the only connection, but that's very interesting.
It's more than financial.
Of course.
Yeah. But it's just interesting that I love that book. I love David Graeber.
Graeber's great in a lot of ways.
What was that, Jordan?
Graeber's great in a lot of ways. Writes a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that I found myself looking at lately is, like 16-year-old Jeremy would kick the shit out of 33-year-old Jeremy. So do you find yourself in that same kind of position?
I've been nervous about 16-year-old Jeremy for a while, to tell you the truth. Is there coming back, or is that like a time portal issue?
No, I mean, it's just that whole idea of, I look back at how fucking radical and out there I was, and now I'm kind of like, well, No,
absolutely. And it's funny because, one of the things, so Eric Y., the guy who did the amazing artwork for Soy Not Oi 2, who I've known since he was like 15, we often have this conversation because he has, as far as his work and sort of the way he is in the world, he's always done things very non-traditionally. I mean, he's done his art for well over 20 years. It's, it's obvious. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Did one of you guys get the book? I can't remember.
I don't have Soy Oi Not 2, but I used to have the original.
First one. Okay. Cause maybe it's someone cause I'd sent one out to your area, and I guess I just made the assumption that one of you guys had it. So there's more than 2 people in Salt Lake City. Actually, more than 3. I know someone else. So there might be 4.
I mean, there's like 5 of us here.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
I had some friends bring it up the other day. They're like, "So you're interviewing Soy Not Oi?" And I'm like, "How the hell do you know?"
Actually, I think I knew who that is, because I asked. I got someone else had written back, and I said, "Oh, do you know these guys?" And they said, "Oh, they're awesome." So anyway, so one of the things we were talking about was how, it's like a grass is always greener situation, because, I, in many ways went traditional route. I got graduate degrees and stayed in one field and, am successful in that way. But I stopped. I mean, I had still, connections to stuff, but I didn't do redoing this book and starting up basically needing to start a publishing company so that I could do it, and doing like the mail order and stuff. I mean, I haven't done stuff like this for well over 20 years. And Eric has been doing a lot of this stuff kind of much more consistently than I am. And so I'm always, sort of from the 16-year-old Jack perspective, lamenting, I can't believe I stopped doing this, because I'm really enjoying that level of it, And when I was 16 and we first got the post office box, I don't know if this is true for you guys when you first started doing this kind of thing, but so we had the post office box, and I used to go on these trips to the post office box to get mail for my band and for the zine and stuff. And it was so amazing to get these letters and, back then cassettes and stuff from all over the world. And it was just holiday every time you go in there. It's like, oh, there's something from Finland. What the hell? It was just really exciting, and now, it's not, sadly I'm old, so it's not as exciting, but I'm still really enjoying getting the emails and hearing from people, and it's like we sent our first book to France the other day. I was like, that's so cool, whatever. But I kind of let that go, and I wish I hadn't, so I definitely lament that. But then when I talk about that with Eric, and he's like, yeah, shut up. You finished your degrees, you have a job. I'm still, struggling with art and, and this and that. So, and so it's, maybe we're both extremes in that way, but I miss that level. And also just, I've moved around a lot because of school and things like that. How long have you guys been in Salt Lake?
Most of my life.
Yeah,
I've lived a couple
much.
other places, but always have drifted back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I, and in many ways, I'm sort of, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but I've moved around a lot. And while there's been some good aspects of that, I think it's much harder to hold on to a community that has the same kind of interest and values. And I miss that. I mean, when we were, and some of it is being younger, but being in Arizona and having a hippie core house and, learning to cook vegan and be, we had this whole crew doing it. And then when you uproot yourself, it's like you're starting over again, and then starting over again, and you're starting over again. And for me, a lot of it was about the relationships and about the friendships and things like that. And I think that's harder, when you're not staying in one place. And, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, do you want to talk about what really pushed you into doing that and starting to do Soy Oi Not too?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to take 2 steps back. So I was living in Boston for a long time, working out there. And I have this friend named Kathy Ferguson. She's known as the Ferg. That's, so if you ever hear Ferg, that's her. And we would hang out once in a while. And I don't know if you've ever been in the situation where a friend of yours oh, do you know so-and-so? I can't believe you don't know this other person. You guys would get along so well. And she kept mentioning this woman, Emily. Every time, I've got to introduce you to Emily. I've got, it's like, Jesus Christ. All right, finally introduces me to Emily. And I met her and her partner, Josh. And they're both really cool. One generation below me. And we would talk about punk and stuff. And it was just interesting because, it's similar where I'm a little older, you have that kind of, and we had some other things in common. And they were vegan. And I was like, oh, that's great. You guys are vegan. I said, hey, whatever it was, 15 years ago or so, 20 years ago, I did this vegan cook zine. I should bring you one over. And they're like, oh yeah, is it kind of like Soy Not Oi? I'm like, oh, you know Soy Not Oi? Yeah, that's the one. They're like, wait, what? Yeah, Soy Not Oi. And they're like, oh, you're Jack from Soy Not Oi. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, and they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. It was like, is that a thing? Like, what's the, you know? So it was just funny because it's like, she was like, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But I just, you know, her reaction was much stronger than I was sort of expecting. So then she's like, I need to interview you. Holy crap. And so then she told me this whole story about how finding Soy Not Oi totally changed her life. And she's this like amazing cook. And, you know, she's like, I took recipes from there and changed them up, and I've done, you know, and I've grown so much since then. And it was so important to me as a woman, and, you know, your images of these positive images of women and all these things. And I was just like, holy shit, that's so cool. So we got to be real good friends, and we started talking about doing a Soy Not Oi too. And she's like, you know, you should do a new one for like, you know, quote unquote, the next generation, you know, so since I'm in my 40s, you know, it's kind of like appealing to the 30 somethings who kind of grew up with it in a different way than, you know, the 40 somethings did or whatever. And I was like, that'd be great. So I talked to Joel about it, and he was totally into it. We're going back and forth about, should it be all new recipes? Should it be, you know, just like a update on the first one with essays from people in their, you know, well, you didn't have to be in your 30s, but it was basically supposed to be like younger people or whatever. So we went back and forth about it several times, and we just never kind of settled on anything. And then every few months we would, you know, kind of get back into the conversation. And I talked to AK Press about it and how they felt about it. And, you know, and I was realizing more and more that, I don't think I really realized at that time that it still had this ongoing staying power. Like I knew AK, you know, kept it and kept pressing it, but I didn't realize that neither Joel or I really realized that it was still kind of selling, like it still existed. I mean, we knew it existed, but like that it, you know, had that kind of like mattering, so to speak.
It had kind of a cult following.
Yeah, I just really had no idea, you know, and it's also depressing, both of us being academics, and it's just like, wow, no one will buy the recent crap I write, but it's still going. It's still awesome, but you know. So anyways, so then we just kept talking about it back and forth, and then as you both know, Joel passed away almost 3 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And when I went to his funeral with my wife and Eric, who I mentioned earlier, our good friend Tabitha. And when we were there, it was just, I had just moved back to the West Coast, and it was so difficult, not only because Joel had passed away, but I had come back to the West Coast with the intention of like really reconnecting and with Joel and with people, because like most of I have some very good friends on the East Coast as well, but I'm probably closer to and have more of a crew on the West Coast in that regard. And so we just felt like, you know, much like you do when someone you care about passes away, like you want to do something, or you just feel so like helpless, like this is horrible. And so then we went back home and then kind of sat with it for a while. And then I just thought, you know what, now we have to do Soy Not Oi too. We have to do it for Joel. We have to do it for his family. And so I just got on the phone and I called Eric first. He's in Amsterdam now. And said, because we had talked about like, what could we do? And I'm like, okay, I know what we can do. We can do Soy Not Oi Part 2, and then just donate all the proceeds to him, do it like we did last time. You know, and that's kind of how it all started. And I contacted Jackie Weltman, who was one of the big contributors in the first one. And she's also like a professional baker, and she's like an incredible, you know, sort of genius cook. She's one of those people like, you're like, well, how come this didn't work out? And then she'll break down the chemicals of, you know, why. And it's like, wait, what? You know, just, I mean, it's like that level of understanding. It's like, I didn't really need it at that degree, but it's pretty impressive, you know? It's like, so what you're really saying is too much salt. Is that you know, I'm smart, but not smart like that, you know? So she kind of took over that role, and then, yeah, we just did it like we did the other one. We just put a call out and said, you know, we're looking for essays, in this case, not about veganism specifically, but about Joel, and then also kind of vegan lifestyle stuff. And it was a difficult conversation because a lot of the people we know are in different places around those kind of things. And, you know, many, you know, varying from like vegetarian to not being vegetarian or vegan. And How can we do this in a way that still has integrity? And, then we started thinking about like, when we did the first one, a lot of the contributors and people weren't vegan either. It was more like people saw it as an opportunity to do something. It was like kind of exactly like we're kind of full circle to what we were talking about earlier. It was this radical idea that pushed you to think about something beyond the way you see yourself in the world. And that's what this was. And it was done in this community way that people wanted to be a part of. So, and I don't remember if it was Jackie or Eric, but one of them, kind of broke it down like, the vegan, having people sit down on vegan dinner is something that everyone can, so if you're not vegan, you can still do that. It doesn't exclude anyone. It's inviting to everyone. Mm-hmm. So it's a place where everyone can come together and talk about these bigger kind of issues, even if they're not, vegetarian or, whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how that all started. It took us over 2 years to sort through, taste all the recipes, type it all up, lay it all out. It took Eric a very long time to do all the art. When you see it, you'll know why. His artwork is just, it's amazing. And it was just, we also had such a high bar because it was for Joel and his family. So it was just, it had to be really, really, really good, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of how that all got started.
How did his family take it?
Fortunately, really, really well. Actually, it's funny because actually his family's coming out next week to visit. And I talked to his wife first. So as soon as I got them, got the big delivery, whatever, that day I sent out copies to Eric and Jackie and his wife, Helen, who also did a lot of amazing work on the book. And then Audrey, Joel's wife, I sent them a bunch of copies for her and her kids. And, she called me a couple days later, and it was one of those phone calls like we both were just kind of halfway in tears and halfway talking, and it kind of went nowhere. But she was just like, "Oh my God, I got Soy Not Oi. Oh my God, it's amazing." I'm like, "Oh, I'm so glad." And then it was just like silence. I don't know what to say. Me either. I don't know what to say. It's so fucking amazing. Oh my God, I'm crying. And they're like, "That's so great." So it's like we both just kind of go, "Okay, I will talk later." So it was just like a. So, and then she sent me a picture of their oldest boy reading it, and I was just, totally in tears from that. And her family has been incredibly supportive, and I talked to his 2 twin sisters last week, and they both were gushing about it and how much it meant to them and how much it means to their niece and nephews and niece. I haven't actually talked to his mom, but I got emails from his mom and his stepmom and his dad. So, right away when I got the reaction, it was like, okay, regardless, we met our objective. It's like, it really honored them. And I think they're really, really excited about it. And it's been getting, other people have been liking it a lot too. So it's been, it's been really great.
Sorry, I hate it when I stumble over my words. Anyways. Like, was there anything like that surprised you, like going through that whole process that like you weren't expecting to come out of it?
Putting the book together?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was. We never really talked about like, how big do we want it? We just kind of let it happen. And then all of a sudden it was like, wow, it's over 300 pages and we have 100 and how many people contributing, because then it was sort of the management of that. Like, okay, we got to do the book and we're still trying to keep this as a benefit. And, so that was sort of surprising. And I think also how to balance, I think it's hard enough, like when you do a project of any kind of project, not wanting your ego to take over and I only will be published on, this kind of paper because, whatever the kind of craziness that people get into. And so how do you balance, like some of that's relevant. Obviously if you put something in the world, you want it to look decent or be decent, but ultimately this project's not about you. Mm-hmm. So I think finding that balance in different conversations was sometimes hard. Because it's kind of like, there was a party that was always kind of like, does that really fucking matter? This book is, a dedication to our friend that passed away and how devastating it is. Are we really going to like be arguing about the binding. I mean, does that really matter? But it kind of does matter, if you understand what I mean. I mean, It is something you're doing. I mean, so, and how to do that in a way that was not ridiculous and ego driven, but still did. And I think we accomplished it, but it was hard. And, we're all spread out. Jackie's in San Francisco. I'm down in Southern California. Eric and Helen are in Amsterdam. So doing a lot of Skype kind of calls and things like that was more challenging, I think, than we thought it was going to be.
One of the things, I could completely understand how to put together a zine. I can get that. Putting together a book, no fucking idea.
Oh yeah, it was. I was the same. I'm totally identify with that. I mean, we really had to get like InDesign, software to set it up. We worked with somebody. We worked with a couple people who are much more like savvy with that. I mean, Eric knew some of it because of his, the stuff that he does as far as art and stuff. But then we worked with this woman, Keely, who does that for a living basically. And could do like the layout and that kind of thing. So, we had to kind of bring the troops in to, get assistance. Cause I felt the same way. Like I understand the concept, but I don't know how this all comes together, So yeah.
And I think like InDesign makes zine making easy.
Do you use it for zines too?
I do now. Like as a kid, I used to like copy and paste and glue zines together.
When you mean copy and paste, you literally mean copy
and paste.
Yeah.
the literal translation. And
for all those young snappers out there.
Yeah.
But now all it is you just throw it in there and you print each page. Some printers print on both sides and you're good to go. And you can just you can staple that thing together and it's done.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Totally. Yeah. But so I learned a lot through that process, but I didn't do layout stuff. I did just editing and, that kind of thing. But Keely McCarthy did the majority of our layout work, which was really, really helpful.
I just missed the days of doing Pinko run. Tons of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny because that part of it really was fun. So it's, I think, again, it's sort of that balance of, what aspects of the technology make it easier, but doesn't make it like soulless, if that makes sense. So, and I think we, accomplished it.
Have you been at all surprised by the success of it?
I wasn't sure, and actually even in the introduction, we kind of talked about like, we have no idea. Well, I was surprised about the success of the first one. I just hadn't, as I said before, but so far the second one is doing really well, like more than I thought. I mean, it hasn't even been out 2 months yet, and we're probably 2/3 to breaking even already. So, and as far as I know, it hasn't been reviewed anywhere officially. It may have been, but I just don't know. But, I've been pretty surprised by the response. But again, it'll be interesting to see, like, as time goes on a little bit, to see what the reviews look like, because the real tricky part for us was, how do we do this in a way that people that didn't know Joel and didn't know this can still relate to it, but it can still honor the family. It's kind of like there are some films you see, and it might be about someone you never, that's like a true story that totally works for you, and you're just totally captured by the story, and you didn't have to know the person. You're just caught in the human aspect of it. And then other times you might see something that's so specific and outside, it's like, I can't even follow this. Like, what are they talking about? It's just, it's too in their world, so to speak, yeah.
So was Joel's family at all involved in the making of it, or were they kind of just separate and kind of got the delivered package?
Totally separate. I involved his wife with all major decisions, although she was just like, do whatever you want. I mean, in a good way, not in an apathetic way, but they did all, I shouldn't say all, but many of them contributed things. So there are brother and sisters contributed recipes and little blurbs about Joel. His mom and dad, his stepmom and dad contributed a recipe and a little blurb about him. His mom contributed a recipe, so they're represented in that way. His wife did a little paragraph about, there's a section on how to make, there's a whole section on beer brewing in it. And she did a little paragraph about different kinds of beer that Joel liked and stuff. So they're all represented in that way. But in terms of the other stuff, they were just like, let us know when it's done and we'll buy a bunch and support it. So actually, it's funny because there's a great record store in Phoenix called Stinkweeds that we're good friends with them. And they bought a bunch of copies when it first came out. And then I heard from Kimber. She's like, I need to buy more books. And it was like 3 days later. I'm like, you guys couldn't have possibly sold out already. She's like, well, Joel's dad was in here and bought like 5 copies or something. I'm like, oh, okay. We sent them some more. So they've been real supportive with that stuff. So I'm real excited about them coming out next week because I haven't seen them in a while. So
I'm super excited to get my copy now.
Yeah.
But how can people get the book and follow, everything that's going on?
Sure. We are soynotoi.com, so soynotoi.com, and you can purchase the book online. It is available through some distributors and through a few stores and stuff, but probably right now it's the easiest way to do it is just through our online website. And I'm in some conversations with like AK and a couple other places that will be also selling it, but you can get it straight from us. It's probably the easiest way.
Sweet. Well, we end every episode saying "fuck, shit, damn." Would you mind saying it for us this week?
We're not fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful weekend.
Really fun.
You guys too. Thanks for having me.
This week you heard
Samples by Locked On.
Right now you're listening to
Frozen Sorcerer by Necro Demon.
Necro Demon.
I want to be a Frozen Sorcerer. That'd be like the Ice King from Adventure Time.
Rate and review us on iTunes. It's super important and helps us a lot. For reals, guys. And I just want to thank everyone who's done it. You guys are all amazing. But rate and review us on iTunes. And follow us on social.
Yeah. We also post a lot of things on our social media that we don't talk about on the show. So you can go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab, and be our friend. Like us. We like you.
Some of you.
Most of you.
Most of you, yeah.
Those of you that we don't.
And you're notified.
We'll send you an email.
Fuck shit, damn. Whoa!
We need a social media intern to join our team. If interested in becoming activist famous or a level 5 vegan, hit us up on social media. Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.